When George asked me to speak, he asked what I'd like to talk about. And I said, I'd like to give one last lecture on ergonomics and office design because I think that our vision of how the microscope is used in an endodontist office today is quite a bit different than most. It's a foundational principle in our office. So I would like to have one more opportunity in Michigan to kind of express what our vision of microscope use is in a modern endodontic office. So what I hope to accomplish is that I can help you become more efficient, work much healthier, and enjoy endodontics more if you are able to adopt some of these things that we're going to be talking about today. So how can we accomplish this goal? Well, the first thing I'd like to do is give you an architectonic sense of how we use the microscope in our office. And then we're going to talk about some very specific skills that if you learn, you will be able to work in this way. And finally, learning this way will give you some understanding of how the operatory has to be designed to take advantage of some of these techniques. If you notice in this speeded up video of us working a complete case together, notice how my assistant Joy is completely upright, comfortable, and has very efficient motions. If you look at my hands, they never really leave the circle of light. And this is how we do basically every single case, from giving anesthesia to placing the rubber dam, to packing, to doing the oral cancer screening. Everything is done under the scope. Not because we need the scope to do everything, but because it's just more efficient to work that way instead of pulling the scope out and then putting it back or just bringing it out when you think you need it because you don't actually know when you need it. So I'd like to spend some time and show you how you can actually work this way, and it will provide great benefits for you if you are able to learn to work in this fashion. So why is this important to you? Well, two big reasons. Number one, your health. And number two, your profitability or your efficiency. First, some facts. The numbers are astounding. 9 out of 10 of you will suffer from some physical impairment that will affect you, your practice, or your ability to provide uncompromised care. And half of you will develop some form of disability in your career. Today's statistics are undeniable. You have a 50% chance of early retirement due to partial or complete disability today. So the numbers are not very encouraging. This is due to the repetitive stress injuries in the neck, lower back, shoulder, wrist, elbow, all due to the repetitive motions carried out in the awkward ergonomic positions that we're forced to perform these procedures in. The effects of chronic pain, they're not just physical, they're psychological as well, and they can affect you relatively early in your career. All of us can identify with the pain this positioning induces in us. And the problem is, once these kinds of repetitive stress injuries start, they are very difficult to get rid of. So my goal here today is to help you create a comfortable, healthy, and productive workspace where you can work ergonomically in a healthy way, avoiding repetitive stress injuries, and where you can be exceptionally productive and efficient when you work. So this lecture is going to focus on how to maintain your health in an endodontic practice. We're going to study motion and efficiency and productivity, and we're going to talk about how to have a long career, how to protect your posture, have balance when you work, avoiding injury, and reduce tremendously the stress and burnout that we are susceptible to as endodontists. I'd like to review how this presentation was put together because it may be confusing to you. This was assembled from video footage over the last 15 years in our office. We have always taken professional video of us working. So over that time period, we've taught over 1,000 endodontists on how to use a microscope ergonomically. So some of this footage is actually from 15 years ago. This is from our team training video back in 2001. and these ones are later. These are two sets from 2007 and 2012. So you'll see a lot of variety, but the important thing is that we really haven't changed very much in that 15-year period. Pretty much all of the basic principles have remained the same. Now, the GoPro revolution has changed things a little bit for us. And one of the problems with having a professional videographer come in is that the footage is very contrived. In other words, you do 50 tries to get one good shot. So you really don't get a sense for how we actually work in real time on a day-to-day basis. So it's very good for demonstrating the perfect motions, but it's not very realistic if a person doesn't actually operate this way. So I wanted you to have a sense for how we actually operate in our office day in, day out. So what these cameras do is they give a relatively good semi-professional video quality, and we place these all around the operatory, and they shoot us actually working. You can see here I have one on the various monitors that we have. I have them everywhere. So we can videotape from any angle that we are working. And we have found this is very useful in teaching ergonomic skills. And there is a remote where I can activate all of these cameras at the same time. So it's a very powerful tool. This may seem really crazy to you, but it's important to teach what we actually do, not what we say we do. So what we've learned in 20 years is that by having multiple perspectives from different vantage points, you can greatly assist in the teaching of these skills, and we can also slow down and speed up the video. For example, if you look at this speeded up video, you get a very good sense of the motions for both myself and my assistant utilized in doing an entire case from start to finish. The multiple vantage points really give a different perspective on the motions that really go on during the treatment of the case. So the ability to show things fast then slow has many advantages. This is the rear perspective, and you get a sense of Joy's actual posture during the procedure. Likewise, a wide-angle view from the side shows her posture through an entire procedure, and you can see she is relatively upright. And showing this in slow motion also has value so that the little tiny nuances, like turning the mirror at the correct angle at the end of the pass, these things are also shown to advantage using the GoPros. So let me communicate what our vision is to you, because our vision really is very distinct. First of all, we do everything under the scope from start to finish. Secondly, all record keeping is done contemporaneously, which means while you are doing it, not after the fact. And thirdly, all reports are completed before the patient leaves the office, not at the end of the day, not the next day or the next week. So doing everything in the scope, you've seen some videos of us doing this. This is actually how we work from the very beginning. The testing, the diagnosis, the oral cancer screening, it's all done under the scope. Another part of our vision is that we do all of our record keeping contemporaneously as we work. The assistant is doing a lot of the record keeping. You can see she's looking at the monitor there. We're actually measuring our working lengths, establishing our working lengths, and those go into the record while we are doing it at the same time. That is what I mean by contemporaneous. All reports are done before the patient leaves the office. All diagnostic reporting, all final reports. It's very simple to actually do this contemporaneously and not at the end of the day or the day after. So this is a big part of our vision. So I'd like you to think about accomplishing more than you ever thought possible. What is the possibility of this? Well, you've seen the possibility a little bit this morning. And what is the alternative to this? Well, this is the alternative, doing some things under the scope and some things without. This is a very, very inefficient way to work, where you're pulling the scope out, then putting it back. It wastes a tremendous amount of time, and it's actually ergonomically very unhealthy. And it's very difficult to do things contemporaneously if you are working like this. You may say, well, this is just an artificial construct, but actually it isn't. This is probably how most endodontists are working. They're doing some things with the naked eye, some things with loupes, and some things with a microscope. And it's just completely unnecessary to work this way. It's easier, it's faster, and it's better to do it under the scope. If you actually look at this comparison between the two models of practice, you should be able to see that one just allows you to do your work and get it done and get on with the next patient, whereas the model on the left is very, very inefficient, very fragmented, with many interruptions. So, you understand the possibility now. We have a saying in TDO, dream big, but focus small. Focus on the details, because this is just a detail kind of thing. The first detail involves a secret. And what is the secret? The secret is that you don't move the microscope. You move the patient. That requires a chair that swivels freely on the floor. So the first secret is have a chair that moves easily, that you can move with your knees. If you look at any of the video, you'll see that I am moving and focusing the patient in the chair all the time, and I'm not moving the microscope. I'm just moving the chair with my knees. This is absolutely critical to the efficient use of the microscope. So most people are fighting their chair. They can't easily move their chair, and therefore they have to move the microscope. Here you can see I'm doing an exam, doing some probing, and I'm moving the patient and chair, not the microscope. The second thing is have the right microscope. This requires a 6-step microscope, or a microscope that goes down to 2.1x. Why? Because you need 2.1 to 2.2x to really be able to do everything under the scope. You need to see from the bottom of the chin to the base of the nose all in one view to do all of the things you need to do under a microscope. So if you have a 3, 4, or 5-step microscope or a Pico, you can't do this. This is what you see with a 5-step. This is a 6-step. You can see the entire mouth, and you can give anesthesia, you can do an oral cancer screening, you can do multi-tooth testing very easily with this wider view. Here you can see the difference in magnification. The 6-step microscope is on the left, and you can see at 2.1x, you have plenty of breadth of vision to do what you need to do. On the right is what you see at the lowest power of the 5-step microscope. You don't have the same breadth of vision, and it's very difficult to do everything under the scope with this limited vision. For example, most clinicians struggle with giving anesthesia under the scope, and it's not really very difficult at all. Any kind of injection can be given under the scope easily if you get used to it, and if you have a 6-step microscope that goes down to 2.1x. There's a lot of coordination between the doctor and the assistant enters the data in suctions. It's pretty much done contemporaneously at the same time. There you can see Joy is suctioning, and she's entering the anesthesia as we are giving it. The type of anesthesia, whether it's a block or infiltration. You'll notice her left arm is stabilized by her armrest, so she's not impinging or poking the soft tissues in the patient's mouth at all. If you look at the minimum magnifications of the different stepped microscopes, you can see that the 4-step has a minimum magnification of 3.2x, which is too much for a lot of the procedures. A 5-step is down to 2.7, and you really want to be down to 2.2 or 2.1x. The G6, the 6-step global, does go down to 2.1x, and that's plenty of field of view to do everything you need to do under the scope. This is our 6-step microscope in our office, and there's basically 6 steps. So at the 0.33 magnification, you're at 2.1x. So the two biggest impediments are the right chair and the right microscope. If you're fighting either one of these, or both of them, it's going to be very difficult for you to do everything under the scope. So solve these two problems first and foremost. We're going to start the presentation by just reviewing some basic principles of ergonomics by giving specific examples of their use in practice, and then we're going to contrast and compare the proper and improper ways of doing this to give you a sense of how easy this is and the skills you need to develop. Motion is classified into 5 different classes. Class 1 motion is moving only your fingers, and a lot of procedures in endodontics, perhaps most, can be done using only Class 1 motions. You can see in slow motion, all I'm doing here really is moving my fingers. The assistant does most of the work. My hands are relatively fixed in position and just kind of grasping the file, not really moving my wrist or hand. Here's some clinical examples with instruments. I return the Explorer with just moving my fingers. Same with the irrigation syringe. So this is an ergonomic discipline, and it keeps you from moving your hands all over the field, and it keeps your hands really in one location. So most procedures can be done with just simply Class 1 motions. Here you can see the mirror exchange. I'm not really doing anything except opening and closing my mirrors. I'm not moving my hand. I'm not twisting at the wrist. I'm just opening my fingers, and Joy is basically doing all the work. Here you can see it speeded up, going through a procedure. If you just study my hands, you can see that it's almost all just Class 1 motions. Occasionally I'll have a Class 2 motion moving my wrist, but you can actually do most endodontic procedures with just Class 1 motions, which makes it much more efficient than moving your hands, moving your wrist, moving your arm, or moving your shoulders. Class 2 motions are moving from the wrist, and occasionally you do need to move from the wrist, and putting the rubber dam clamp on is a perfect example. You're moving your wrist. I take the clamp off. In slow motion, you can see that it's a wrist movement, so that's a Class 2 motion. I remove the clamp. Class 3 motions are movements from the elbow, and endodontists do a lot of Class 3 motions, and it adds tremendously to their inefficiency. Going to the stropco or your handpiece is a typical Class 3 motion. You're rotating from the elbow. And one of the repetitive stress injuries is taking your elbow off the armrest, and that causes the muscles of the shoulder girdle and muscles of the back and neck to be under stress. So we position our cart that so we can make almost an effortless Class 3 motion by keeping our elbow on the armrest. Here you can see I'm doing some testing and going to the stropco with a Class 3 motion. I position the cart so I know exactly where it is. I don't even have to look at the cart because I've kept my elbow right on the armrest, so I know that distance perfectly well. Class 4 motions are motions from the shoulder, and these are very destructive ergonomically and are the cause of much injury in endodontic procedures. You see a Class 4 motion to bring the microscope down into place when you're starting a case, so that is movement from the shoulder. But there aren't really any other movements from the shoulder that you should be doing. Here's a typical example of what I see when I visit other endodontists. That's a Class 4 motion, your movement from the shoulder. Or the typical chicken wing problem, where you've got your elbow up and you're trying to instrument into a posterior tooth. Puts a lot of pressure on your neck, your back, and your shoulder. If you go to the web and observe a lot of microscopic endodontic websites, you see a lot of Class 4 motions being shown, not only with the doctor, but with the assistant as well.